Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. Again, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure and a delight to be here. Always a pleasure to see everyone. And we're extremely lucky. I'm incredibly lucky to have Lou be my co-presenter today. He is all the way from Delaware. He just presented last week to the entire SBDC network on our monthly internal calls about what they do in Delaware, specifically for SBIR and TTR grants. So we're really lucky to have him. They do a lot of that work there. Lou, if you don't mind, I will let you do a quick introduction about what you do and also your center. I know you have a very interesting ecosystem you're building out and doing a lot of things and working with a lot of companies that are registered as C Corps, for example, in Delaware. So even though they do not necessarily live there.
Yeah, okay. I hope everybody can hear all right. I'm using my phone because my microphone decided not to work today. So I was on the corporate side of things for almost 40 years, small companies and in large companies. And I did a lot of SBIR, STTR, a lot of BAAs, you name it, lots of R&D development, and always with a focus on commercialization. And now I'm at the Delaware SBDC. We're small. We like to say we're small but mighty. We have some pretty good success in getting grant funding, getting products developed, and we all have just built out DTP at STAR, which is the Delaware Technology Park at the STAR campus for life sciences and a number of things, and also are beginning to build with Discover Bank, a fintech center for software development. That's about all I'd like to say right now, and I think we should get on with the program.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Lou. So let's cover first of all the agenda. I want to talk about what we will cover and won't cover, so everyone's expectations are lined up. So we'll talk about writing grant proposal for NIH and NSF only. We'll talk about how do agencies think, what is important to them. We'll go through the overview of most important sections for both agencies and specific tips and examples, sort of the do's and the don'ts. We're not going to cover the general SBIR, STTR program, what they fund or what the other agencies are. We're not going to go over the application process and all the registrations you need to do for that. We're also not going to touch on formatting and all the nitty-gritty. It's mostly grant writing. So we're happy to answer any questions later afterwards if you have them. So when you think about NSF or NIH grant, I would like to say that step number one is really asking the right question and asking a big enough question that the agency will actually care to give you money so you can answer that question. If it's a small question, it's incremental, they're not interested. The best example I always think of when I think about the big question is there's an interesting book called The More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. And he gives an example of just how important it is to ask a big question. There was a inventor who had a accident, had a prosthetic device. Back then it was super uncomfortable and extremely painful to walk on. And his first question was, how can I make it more comfortable? But when he stepped back, because he was a marathon runner, he asked a bigger question. He asked, how can I run on an artificial leg? And by asking that question, he that bigger, better, more beautiful question. It completely pivoted what he was reinventing and how he was doing it. At the end, he was the one who created the cheetah leg. And now you see athletes who had amputated limbs run on cheetah legs. And it's all about asking the question. If he asks, how can I make it more comfortable to walk? He never, ever would have come up with that solution. So again, how big is the question? Can you ask a bigger question? Don't start with a solution. Now, the second step is once you ask a bigger question, the question that's actually interesting to answer is how big is your thinking? And that is the intellectual merit, so to speak. Again, it's not incremental that they're looking for. They're looking for something radical, something very interesting. Again, how big are you thinking when it comes to your solution? Step 3 is there a product or a service? Again, it's an innovation grant, not a pure research grant that cannot be commercialized. So can it be commercialized? What Lou and I talked about it a lot when we discussed the societal benefits and the fact that too many startups, when they write a grant, they pitch societal benefit at the expense of the product. If it's a societal benefit that you cannot sell, it will not fly. And I like to say that invention, pure research, is about new knowledge and insight, but innovation is about bringing that knowledge and insight in the form of a product to market. And SBIR, it is an innovation grant, not a pure invention grant, even though the money given is for the R&D, for the research. And finally, step 4 is why you. You have to prove that you have experience and your team can deliver. There's a difference between NIH and NSF. If you are writing a grant for an NIH, you should focus on academic achievements. If you're writing for NSF, it's the business side that you should be pitching at the expense of the academic side. Again, academic side is important. You have to prove that you can deliver the technology, but those agencies look at it differently. And finally, we'll not discuss budget today in great detail, but I wanted Lou to just say a few words, NSF versus NIH, and just direct and indirect costs. Lou, do you mind giving us a little bit of the flavor on the budget end?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sure, no problem. I actually want to talk about indirect costs. A lot of people, when they submit their first proposal, kind of blow this off and go, and think that the indirect costs aren't important, or maybe I'm going to get a better score if I don't, consider indirect costs. None of that's true. If you don't take a look at what it costs to get the work done, and I'm talking about things like, what about PPE? What about your business license? What about your rental costs? What about your utilities? You need to add all these things up and get a good handle on what your overhead is, and project that cost into the proposal, because if you don't pay for that stuff, you're going to pay for it out of your pocket. You have no money like most people don't. You're going to flounder and you're not going to get your work done. Now, NSF and NIH are two very different organizations. NSF is grant only. NIH is grant and or contract, depending on what you get. NSF will give you the grant money in chunks and up front, where NIH won't. You have to be reimbursed for work you've done. So that creates another little bit of a problem. But in terms of indirect costs, they both have a de minimis, which you can look up online. I can't remember if it's 20 or 40%. Don't just take that number. Some people think that, well, it says I can take 40%, and that's the de minimis, so they'll be fine with that. Yeah, they'll be fine with it in your proposal, but at the end of the day, if they decide to find out how much you actually spent and where it was spent, you may end up giving them money back. So that's both of those organizations are the same way. NIH, through their Office of Financial Assistance or Financial Accounting Systems, is able to do indirect cost negotiations. NSF doesn't do that. So if NSF is your cognizant program, you'll have to do some sort of a desk audit with them eventually. If NIH is your cognizant sponsored office, then they will do one with you. So separating direct and indirect is very important. Getting enough indirect costs to cover most of your overhead is also very important. So don't forget that. Okay.
Thanks so much, Lou.
Back to you, Laura.
So now we're going to move on to do's and don'ts. We'll try to go quickly through them because we want to get your questions more than anything else. So the do's and don'ts, number one, I mean, reading the solicitation, I know it's basic, but trust us when we say some clients just do not spend the time reading the solicitation. And understand what your reviewers are looking for and how they're evaluating you. So we'll go a little bit over what the review criteria is for NSF versus NIH, because it is extremely important. Again, for NSF, 3 criteria: intellectual merit, broader impact, and commercial impact. If we look at NIH, slightly different. We have more criteria. Significance, which is a little bit like intellectual merit, right? They're looking at investigators much closer, and again, that's academic part of it. They're looking at innovation, that's similar. Then they're looking at the approach, which is the strategy and methodology. Again, for NIH, it's much more critical. Your methodology is critical. And then environment. They are evaluating you in your facilities and resources. Again, read the guidelines. You will get the slides. That's the reason why we included the links. One thing we do want to say is answer only questions required in each section. Do not repeat information over and over and over again. It especially comes when it comes to commercialization aspect versus the intellectual merit or R&D part. Because you're getting money for R&D, do not try to include anything commercialization-wise in the sections that do not ask for that. So what are the sections? Here you can see NSFs by sections. We'll only really focus on summary and description. The rest of them are a little bit self-explanatory or just require one-on-one deep dive. You will have 3 boxes to fill in for NSF, which is the overview, the intellectual merit, and the broader commercial impact. You have to hit them from the beginning. They're very short. You have to convince them from out of the gate what is it that you're trying to do. Now, when we move to project summary, you have the following parts. You have the elevator pitch. That includes everything: customer value proposition, innovation. Then you have the commercial opportunities section. That's where you talk about what you will do. How will you bring the product to market after you've done R&D? Again, you cannot use their money to do the commercial part, but you have to talk about how you will get there. You'll talk about your innovation, your company and team, and then do the technical discussion. For NIH, you have, we'll go by sections, but one thing is important: speak with an HHS program manager before submitting an application. And program managers will discuss the institute or center that might be interested in your proposed technology and how they want to see it. Again, NIH is a more difficult animal because of all the centers that they have. Lou, do you want to say a little bit more about talking to the program managers at NIH?
Yeah, I guess I can add a little.
Example of clients who maybe shot themselves in the foot by being too cautious and sort of afraid to talk to them.
Yeah, you shouldn't be afraid to talk to them. Sometimes it's difficult to figure out who to talk to at NIH because there's so many institutes involved in that organization. One thing that I do is I send people to Matchmaker. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that or not, but it's on NIH's reporter website. You can stick an abstract in there, keywords, and it'll look around through NIH and bring back a whole bunch of things that were funded or programs that were in place that sort of match up, and you can see what which institutes did the funding. And that doesn't mean that, you can't propose, similar work, but what it does tell you is that you can go to that institute and make contact, and they'll probably be interested in what you're pitching. Mm-hmm. Also, they seem to be once you make contact, they seem to be very helpful. And I know many people send their specific games page to the program managers to read, and they'll come back with comments if they have the time to work on it. So. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah, and I know just a lot of people are afraid because they think they will say the wrong thing and that would actually hurt them, when in fact it's the opposite. They do want you to get funded. So again, quickly NIH section by section. So you have the project summary and the abstract. Please do not include proprietary information in any of the summaries, both NIH and NSF. Summaries should not include any proprietary information. So you will focus on description of the project and the relevance. And then the biggest sections are the specific aims and then the research strategy. And we can, again, go over specifics afterwards. So now the do's and the don'ts. So we'll be going back and forth between NSF and NIH, and hopefully it will actually help you because we're contrasting, even though the language sometimes is very similar if you just read between NIH and NSF, but their thinking is different. So they put different weight on how they approach it. So when it comes to technology, the do's and don'ts, you have to balance risk with evidence that your approach is grounded in reality. And it's a tough balance to hit. There's some proposals that we see that are, they're overweighting the risk because they want to show how innovative they are. And there's some proposals that overweight the proof that it would actually work. That's also not good because then NSF is saying, well, you pretty much are ready to hit the ground running. You don't need to de-risk the technology side of it. So do not underplay the technical risk, but specify if there's no risk, you should be just going to angel investors and VCs. So talk about the technical risk, but then you de-risk it by proving what has been done before by you or by others. So there is evidence that your hypotheses are correct and they will work under best circumstances, but it is still risky enough and innovative enough to be funded. The biggest thing about tech objectives and specific aims, so we're talking about both NSF and NIH, you have to include measurable goals. If you think, how will you know that you succeeded and how will the agency know that you succeeded? You need to know that you succeeded or not, they need to know. And it has to be measurable. Again, just to go back to the previous idea that guaranteed success is not the goal of your pitch. There has to be risk, but you need to include measurable goals. How will you know that you de-risked it? Lou, do you want to talk a little bit more about the what you see missing sometimes in specific, either in specific aims or the tech objectives when it comes to NSF? Any examples? How often do you see proposals that do not have clear enough measurable goals, or they're clear to the startup, but they're not clear to the agency?
Well, probably about 50% of the time when it's the first proposal, but after that, they seem to catch on pretty quick. The way I try to help people is to get them to build tables into their tech plan so that they write down their milestones, write down their metrics, write down how they know they succeeded, and that usually gets them to put together something that's measurable. And I think that's the thing, is make sure that the reviewers know what you're going to measure, how you're going to measure it, and when you know you've succeeded. As far as specific aims, that's a tough cookie. I've seen specific aims pages that look completely different and still get funded. So, you know, they have their format, but sometimes getting the words into the format is tricky. The one thing that you need to do is if it's in the specific aims, make sure that's in your tech plan for NIH. Don't have anything completely different in one place than the other. Now, a lot of this stuff you just have to treat one-on-one. It's hard to make generalities.
So going forward, again, we're still on technical objectives and specific aims. You have to articulate how you will do the work. NIH added that they want to see preliminary research in the approach section. So please focus on that and don't leave that out. For NIH, make sure your specific aims align with your research strategy and structure. So when you want to achieve specific aim, you have to have a research strategy that lines up, and they're not going in two different directions. For NSF, again, same thing, but you have your key objectives in the technical discussion, and they have to align with your R&D plan and specific actions and activities that you say you will be doing. So let's jump into commercialization do's and don'ts. So remember, I mentioned that you do not want to mix sections if you answer only what is being asked. So when you talk about your customer discovery and go-to-market strategy, you talk about it in the commercialization part of NSF. You do not want to bring it into other sections. When you're talking about your R&D, you should not be talking about commercialization in things like working with the customer to get more feedback. They're not paying you for that. So be very, very, I call it bucketized. Just put everything in their own buckets and keep them there. Remember, the money is only for R&D, not for business development, not for gathering customer feedback or any market research. Lou, commercialization is sort of your forte. So do you want to give any examples or any thoughts on commercialization do's and don'ts in general?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, for NSF, commercialization is a big deal. So I would say that the best thing to do for NSF and even for NIH is 9 times out of 10 they're developing a platform technology that you can use for a lot of different products. Pick your MVP. Pick the one product that you're going to use to go out with and research it. Go as far down the value chain as you can. Find out what it's worth, what people are going to pay for it, what the market will bear, and those kinds of things, and put those numbers in. If you can put numbers in your commercialization plan for phase 1, you'll get pretty good scores. You have to put them in for a phase 2, but I don't think we're talking about phase 2s today. For NIH, you just have to have a plan for what you're going to do. You don't need to dig into you just have to say, this is how I'm going to commercialize this product. And in fact, I don't think there's even a commercialization section in the NIH phase 1 proposal. But if it's in there, it's helpful.
So again, big difference between NSF and NIH on that one. NSF, the more detailed, the better. And in fact, we'll talk about letters of support, and we'll circle back to that because that difference will play a key role in your letters of support. So again, one thing to focus on is you need to talk about the current state. You need to talk about the possible competition, including your customer's opinion option to continue as they have always done it. I think a lot of companies ignore the fact that something is being done the way it is done right now. And if your solution is, for example, too expensive, it may not be commercially viable. And your customer will go with the plan A, which is keep going like they're going right now. Do not ignore references to the existing solutions. We see that very often where startups do not mention existing solutions. They try to make it sound like they are the first ones to market, or there's no one else trying to do what they do. Lou, how often do you see your clients sort of trying to dodge that section or kind of go very lightly? And what impact have you seen from the agencies when that's done?
Yeah, when we work with people, we work with them a lot on the market sizing and that sort of thing for phase 1. The one thing that I see quite a bit is that people don't, proposers don't look at the competition and say, you know, this is company X, they have this product, company Y has this product. You know, and sometimes they'll spell out what it is, but they never say why theirs is better than the existing products. And that's really important. You need to differentiate your product from the rest of the products that are already out there.
I like to usually use an example. If you can get into the mind of your customer, they're making a purchasing decision. There's a reason they will purchase your product versus somebody else's product versus purchasing nothing. And that's what you're trying to articulate. You're trying to make it convincing for NSF that your product will be better. It will be so much more appealing based on, you know, whether it's better outcomes or you can do cheaper, faster, whatever that is. That has to be articulated. I need to understand as a reviewer, why would someone pick your product over somebody else's? I think we mentioned it before, but we wanted to say it again and again. Mention societal benefit, but do not oversell societal benefit. Again, there has to be a product. So don't rely on the societal benefit to carry you through. They will fund if it's innovative, it's breakthrough, if it's commercially viable. Just societal benefit, it's an innovation grant. Again, it's how can you bring it to market, and that's the overall goal. So to kind of wrap up, what do you need to focus on? When you read your proposal or you have someone read it for you, ask them at the end of the review, can they tell you back, why do you want to do this project? What benefits could accrue if the project is successful? So why? Can they tell you what is it that you want to do? So if someone read your proposal and was to tell someone else about it, how would they say, what is it that you will actually be doing? Then how you plan to do it, what's your execution? And then how will you know that you succeeded? That's going back to metrics. So now we're going to the letters of support. They're different for NIH and NSF. NIH is really looking for credibility of the PI. So your letters of support are all about establishing PI's credibility and validating proposed methodology of the project. For NSF, it's more about validating market need. PI is not as important. You're trying to validate technical expertise, so your letters of support should be reflecting that. So for example, the best example from NSF comes when they try to explain that a letter of support can be no more than a letter from a potential customer saying that they would be willing to buy a product that does XYZ or solves problem X. They don't even need to mention your company. And that's, I think, critical, and a lot of startups miss that. They're busy gathering letters of support, thinking that the letter of support needs to say, I have all the faith in company X and I will buy their product. That's actually not as important for NSF if it's not actually true, if they feel that that's not true or accurate. They would much rather see you get a strong letter of support about the problem, that the problem exists, that the market is looking for a solution. Then they're much more willing to fund you. Again, not the same for NIH. NIH, all about the PI. Lou, do you want to talk about PIs on NIH and NSF from your perspective? Whom do you see as PIs on the client's proposals?
Oh, yeah, sure. For NSF, they don't really care who the PI is. It's kind of strange. They care more about, you know, what's the prowess of the technical people within the organization, in terms of personnel anyway. They have no stipulation about what a PI is. NIH, on the other hand, is very concerned about the PI and how many papers has this guy written? What's he doing? How has he benefited society, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very strange. You have both ends of the spectrum here, and neither one of those meet in the middle.
Mm-hmm. So general tips before we move on to the questions. So think of the reviewer. Again, if you think of giving it first to a friend and asking them the questions, did you understand why am I trying to do it? Did you understand what am I going to be doing? How I'm going to be doing it? And getting that feedback, yes or no, is it clear, is it not? The technical expertise is important. Obviously, the reviewers are looking at the technology, but the general clarity of the product, of the proposal should be at such level that you can give it to your friend and they should be able to say yes or no, they understand or they don't. So use headings to make it easy to find information, chunk it out for reviewers, keep it short and simple. State your points very directly, and don't include what Lou calls much too much background stuff. But also don't assume that reviewers will figure it out. You have to communicate it. What is it that you want them to conclude? So don't assume that they will make a leap. Also, they will not look at the references outside of your proposal. So anything you want to include should be there. They're not going to go on the website and read about what you are mentioning. You have to articulate what the end result, what's the bottom line is. They're not going to go out and search for it. Use graphics. They help, and then avoid acronyms because sometimes people are very specialized. They're super specialized to the point where acronyms can actually cross over and they mean totally different things. So as far as most common reasons for rejections, one of it is if you did not convince reviewers that there's novelty or uniqueness. Again, that could be about the question that you're asking or about the solution that you're proposing. There can be a lack of technical details and you will get kicked back. It's just too vague, especially when you're articulating your research and work plans. It has to be very specific. If there are no statements around feasibility, about risk, or measure of success, again, you're going to get kicked back. Lack of references to prior work by others. We mentioned that. Don't be afraid to rely on, again, you have to support that what you are proposing is actually plausible and someone did some preliminary work to de-risk some of the ideas, right? And same about competition. Some, make references to your competition. Lack of overall clarity in the narrative is actually bigger than you think. Those reviewers are going through a lot of applications and it is extremely mentally exhausting. So if you're not making it clear, if you're trying to be too clever, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. Not enough expertise on the team. Again, you know the difference now between NIH and NSF. It's a different kind of expertise.
No, froze.
Yeah, I think Laura got frozen.
Money for phase one. It's not a lot of money. If you can't execute on that money, don't overpromise. And for NSF, it will be if you're not understanding who will be your customer and who will write the check. Again, you will be kicked back. So Lou, do you want to first mention any other rejection issues that you see before we turn it to Q&A?
No, I think you pretty much got it. I would say you were frozen for a few minutes there, so forgive me if I repeat something that you already said, but geez, make sure you read the solicitation really carefully and make sure all the administrative things are taken care of.
Okay, so let me stop sharing and we'll open it up to questions and see if we can help. Okay, so question, what are the differences between business development and commercialization? Business development, if it's What it traditionally means is you're doing business development. It means someone is making phone calls, someone is establishing connections with customers, someone is sort of paving the way for sales. Commercialization is the entire plan, your strategy to go to market. So it's not about making phone calls and looking for specific partners. It is about what segment of your customer base you will go after first. What is the pricing? What is your business model? What are you selling? What are you not selling? So those are two very different things. But again, I think when you're asking that question, you're referring to the fact that the agency will not give you money to do that. They will not give you money to do either one. So you can't do business development. You can't pay for someone to fly to a company and try to establish connections for further, sales efforts. And they will not pay for commercialization. They will not. You can't print, brochures using their money. I believe we are sharing slides. Is that correct?
Yes, we will share the slides with all attendees afterwards.
And that's why we were so heavy on text, and I apologize. I don't like to use a lot of text on slides, but this is where if someone missed it, looking through the slides is easier than listening to us sometimes. So that's why they're text heavy. So yes, you will get the slides. Any other questions?
Laura, it looks like there's a question in the chat to repeat your comment about not overweighting risk and proof.
Sorry, so I must not be looking at the questions.
There's a couple of comments, there's a couple of questions that accidentally got into the chat feature.
Oh, okay. So the difference between overweighing risk versus feasibility?
The comment about not overweighting risk and proof.
Okay, so on one hand, you have to say that this is risky enough, meaning we have a hypothesis and we need money to test it, to de-risk that part. There should be a chance that you may not succeed, because if there's a clear path to where you're pretty much convinced that it will work, you should be going to VCs. You should be going to angels. You should be going and getting money from them because there's no risk. The whole issue with the grants is, and the reason they exist is when investors look at the startups, there are two types of risk that they are considering. There's the technical risk and there's the market risk. The technical risk is it's not going to work. The market risk is no one's going to buy it, or you're not going to have a successful execution and you will not be able to sell. So the technical risk is the one that VCs, angels, they don't like. They don't want to fund your R&D only to find out at the end that there's nothing you can do. There's no amount of money that can be thrown into the company because the tech just doesn't work. It was too risky. The assumptions were unfounded at the end of the day. There was a hope that it would work, but when you did your R&D, you just could not make it work. The tech fell apart. That's what the grants are for, to de-risk that. So you can go back to VCs and angels and say, technically, we have solid proof, as solid as you can, because you can't de-risk everything. But we are sure that the technical risk is not there. The only risk is in bringing a product to market, and that's why we're raising money so we can go out to market. So you have to articulate that there's risk. On the other hand, if you are too far out there, you're basically creating a time machine. It's just not feasible. If the experts read and they say, I don't think that, chemically, that's not going to work. Or if it's if it has to do with chemistry, right? If it's biology, if they're reading and they're saying, I don't see how that's going to work. That's where you have to cite prior work, and you have to say, no, there is evidence that we're on the right track. We're on the right thinking track. But we still need to de-risk it because there's some risk. Lou, do you have a better way of articulating it, or any examples of how you think about it? Lou, you're muted.
Not really.
Okay. Any other questions? There was a question about a link to the matchmaking portal.
Yeah, we dropped that in the chat box, so that should be there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm switching between the two.
Did you see the one about from Mitchell Collier?
Oh, okay. I'm back in the chat. Yes, sorry, I'm switching between Q&A and chat. What would be the reaction to a proposal that seeks to conduct beta testing to refine a digital product? This is part of R&D, but also borders into gathering customer feedback. That is yeah, you're walking that line of you may not be fundable. Refining a digital product, to me, refining is incremental to begin with. And then because it's based on customer feedback, I mean, you have market risk, but not so much the technical risk. Lou, how would you look at it?
Yeah.
How would you phrase it to have a shot at getting funded in that case?
Software is a whole different world. I have seen them, they do allow beta testing and that sort of thing because it's part of what has to be done. It's almost like doing a preclinical study for NIH with a drug or some sort of a medical device. You know, if it's in your, I wouldn't put customer feedback in, but a beta test, you know, to make sure that the product does work. It's definitely possible statement of work for software development.
Lou, do you have a problem with the word refining though? I mean, and that's where, how do you position it so it doesn't sound like refining? Because refining to me is a kiss of death.
Yeah, that's like using refine and optimize. Those are bad words. I wouldn't say refine a digital product. Test a digital product. That's all you have to say. You don't have to. I don't want to get into semantics, but things like refine, optimize, those are all phase 2 words, not phase 2 words or phase 1 words. There's something else I wanted to comment on. Somebody was asking about doing market or getting market research and that sort of thing. You can't put that in your work plan, but that could definitely be part of your indirect cost pool because it's a valid business expense. So that's also why it's important to have your indirect costs delineated so that you understand where that money's going to go.
Yeah, the profit part is where you can put in anything and you can do anything as long as the entire project does not smell of pure engineering and commercialization. Engineering meaning you just have to go through the steps, but the risk is very low. You know that you're going to get to the end. You have to have risk.
The other thing, and this is a little off topic, but if you're that far along with a product, you should see if DoD wants it, because they really do they do prototyping in phase 1.
Let's see, any
maybe this is a question for Laura and Julie. There is some questions in regards to offering individual consulting service through the SBDC.
other parting thoughts?
Would you be able to speak a little bit more about that? What that engagement process looks like?
Sorry, can you say it again?
There's some questions in the Q&A box about, offering individual consulting services and how does one engage with the SBDC. I don't know if Julie or Laura, you can speak briefly about that.
I'll probably have Julie talk about that on behalf of the entire SBDC.
Sure, yeah, but if anybody is interested in SBIR specific assistance, you can of course reach out to Laura directly. I put her email in the chat. But if anybody, we have 2 other consultants who can also help with SBIR at any phase. And we have somebody who's working on the RADX team right now. So all 3 consultants are well-versed in SBIR applications. So if you reach out to Laura at laura.beken@ociesbdc.com earlier in the chat, and I'll put it again, the link to our contact form. All of the consulting is no cost and one-on-one. So just either reach out directly or complete the contact form. We're happy to help you.